Hey everyone, Dark Magician of Team Sorcerers here, and welcome back to What If Wednesday. Yeah, a couple of back-to-back ones here, and Bertie's back. And this one's another suggestion by Joseph Barfield, 6930, and that is, what if Hypno-Disc defeated Chaos 2 in Series 3? Well, the only way this could happen is if Hypno-Disc doesn't get flipped and it's able to damage Chaos 2's flipper. There was that moment, of course, in the final where Chaos 2 flipped and it landed on top of the disc and stopped it moving, but didn't seem to damage Chaos 2. But yeah, the only way Hypno-Disc would win in this scenario is if it just significantly damages Chaos 2's flipper, like, or rips it clean off, or at least just damages it to a point where the flipper goes at an angle where it can't do anything. And with Chaos 2 weaponless, this increases the chances of Hypno-Disc winning the whole thing. So whether it comes to a judge's decision or not, it's Hypno-Disc that's crowned the Series 3 champion. So because of this, this would mean that they swap seeds basically. So, oh, and that bird is off. So obviously Hypno-Disc would be 1 and Chaos 2 would be 2, and basically they swap heats basically, and so would the robots they fight. So basically Hypno-Disc, Razor Blade and the Predator would be in heat A, while Chaos 2, Atomic and Indefatigable would be in heat P, while everything else stays the same. So heat A, Hypno-Disc and Razor Blade win their fight, and then in the other fight, King B3 and Medusa 2000 go through. Hypno-Disc would then defeat Medusa 2000 with not too many problems. And speaking of problems, Razor Blade is still having some issues, like moving about freely, whereas King B3 is in complete working order and just shoves it all over the place, and just easily wins that way. This would mean the two seeds would meet in the heat final, but unfortunately King B3 wouldn't stand a chance against Hypno-Disc. I mean, Hypno-Disc would just tear into the sides, jam up the wheels, or just completely rip them off and leave King B3 for dead. So Hypno-Disc wins the heat. So then in the last one, Chaos 2 and Atomic win their fight. VMAX and Terrible win the other one. And what would likely happen is VMAX would face Chaos 2 because it was pitted against Hypno-Disc in the real timeline, whereas Terrible would then go on to face Atomic. So yeah, Chaos 2 would defeat VMAX, Atomic would defeat Terrible and beat it quite quickly just by flipping it onto the side, and then in the heat final it basically plays out the same way. Now at this point I should mention about its seeding, Atomic Series 5 seeding. Now because in this timeline King B3 reached the heat final, it would be more likely to be seeded. It's hard to say how the seeds were decided and how they were ordered, but I think because Atomic is the newest robot from Series 4 to be seated lower, it probably wouldn't be seeded, and King Beef Powerworks would more likely be the 22nd seed instead for the Fifth Wars. But we'll get to that in a bit. So yeah, the semi-finals are almost the same, but now this means that Hypno-Disc would fight Steg 2 and Chaos 2 would fight Splinter. So semi-final 1, it's a bit awkward that the two grand finalists who faced each other here face off again, but so be it. But, I feel like Hypno-Disc would more than likely beat Steg 2. Then the other semi-final fights in semi-final 1 play out the same way, but it now means Hypno-Disc would go up against Tornado. Now, this would normally be an easy win for Tornado, and you would think it would beat Hypno-Disc here, but remember, Tornado was having some problems at this stage, having one side of it stop working, like both right near the end of the fight with Really Big Cheese and then during the fight with Chaos 2. So even though Tornado would start off quite well, those problems would end up happening again. I mean, just when Hypno-Disc seems to be on the verge of losing, being dethroned, the issues with Tornado happen, and then Hypno-Disc goes in for the kill and just tears into Tornado, and then goes through to the grand final. Then Pussycat beats Dominator 2 and goes through to the grand final as well. So then in the other semi-final, 3 of the fights play out the same way, of course. Chaos 2 then flips Splinter over, and of course it's not able to get back up. And then Chaos 2 would go up against Wild Thing and beat it quite easily. Well, even though it would probably go to a judge's decision. It would just be too much of a struggle here. I mean, if the Series 5 version of Wild Thing couldn't beat Chaos 2, then, well, no offence, but what chance does the Series 4 version have? So we would have the same grand final lineup, but if they're still doing it where one grand finalist from a semi-final faces one from a different semi-final, then the pairings would be different. So this would mean that Hypno-Disc would fight Stinger and Chaos 2 would fight Pussycat in the grand final eliminators. Now, the Pussycat versus Chaos 2 fight would play out the exact same way as in the real timeline, and and Hypno-Disc would just tear into the wheels of Stinger. I mean, Stinger's a slippery customer, but it seems to be no problem for a spinner. So, Hypno-Disc would just keep slamming into the wheels, just tearing great gashes into it. I mean, Stinger might survive and keep going, but it would end up losing on a judge's decision. And but Stinger should be okay to fight in the playoff, and we actually would get a playoff. And Pussycat and Stinger would fight each other like 1 year earlier, because of course they did face each other in the All-Stars. Whether or not they still would is another matter, but it goes the same way basically. Pussycat would beat Stinger like fairly easily, even just by simply damaging the tyres. So with this, Stinger would finish 4th and Pussycat would take 3rd place. And now we'd have the top 2 robots face each other again in the grand final. You have the exact same grand final. Now I did already go over a scenario in a previous episode where Chaos 2 would fight the Series 4 version of Hypno-Disc, but I genuinely think Hypno-Disc would still win this exact matchup here, so it ends up going near enough the same way as the other fight, but this time one of Chaos 2's sides would get jammed up, and this time it would be a KO blow, so Hypno-Disc keeps the title and is the 2-time in a row UK champion instead of Chaos 2. This means that the top 3 seeds for the 5th Wars would be in a different order. So, again, Hypno-Disc and Chaos 2 keep their 1st and 2nd seed ranks respectively, but this time Pussycat would be the 3rd seed, but all the other seeds would remain exactly the same. I mean, Razor would still be 4th because it's the world champion, and Stinger would still be 5th, so on and so forth. And like I said, because King B3 made it to the heat final, it means that it would more likely be seeded instead of Atomic. So they basically swap heats. So King B3, King B Powerworks and Chronic 2 would be in Heat B, and Atomic and Can Opener would take their place in Heat F. But we'll get to that in a bit. So Heat A, I already went over this scenario before. So yeah, Hypno-Disc and Black Widow are in this heat instead of Chaos 2 and Stormforce. So the winners of the first rounds would be Hypno-Disc, Smidsy, 8645T and Steel Avenger. Hypno-Disc would then face Steel Avenger and trash it. Smidsy would still beat 8645T, and then in the heat final, Hypno-Disc would beat Smidsy, even though it was for a judge's decision. So yeah, we have a very different Heat B, of course. Bulldog Breed, Juggernaut 2, Warwart and Lamsey are still in this one, but now we've got Pussycat, the Executioner, King B Powerworks, and Chronic 2, like I said. So Pussycat, King B, Bulldog Breed, and Lamsey would win their respective fights, but it's unlikely that the 2 seeds would face each other in round 2. I mean, honestly, I don't know why Hypno-Disc and Atomic got paired in round 2 in the real timeline, but I feel like they'd be kept separate, and either Pussycat would face Bulldog Breed or it would face Lamsey. Same with King B facing either Bulldog Breed or Lamsey. But I think Bulldog Breed would actually beat Pussycat here. I mean, sure, this version of Bulldog Breed is maybe a bit easier to damage, especially at the back, but it's unlikely it would be significant, and if anything, it could be another version of that tag team fight where Bulldog Breed would end up flipping Pussycat out of the arena, which would be a major shock, seeing the 3rd seed eliminated here. King B Powerworks would more than likely beat Lamsey, and then it would face Bulldog Breed in the heat final, but I don't see King B beating Bulldog Breed here. It would just flip it all over the place, and Bulldog Breed would win the heat. Of course, alternatively, Pussycat would beat Lamsey in round 2, and Bulldog Breed would beat King B, and then Bulldog Breed would beat Pussycat in the heat final. Either way, Bulldog Breed would win the heat. And then for Heat C, D and E, literally nothing changes. Heat F, it's mostly the same, but with Atomic and Can Opener in here. So Dominator 2, Atomic, Corkscrew and Exterminator would win their respective fights. And then in round 2, Corkscrew would still beat Exterminator, and then Dominator 2 would face Atomic, but Atomic would more than likely win this one. I mean, maybe Dominator 2 would get some hits in with the axe, but more than likely Atomic would just keep flipping Dominator 2 all over the place and send it flying out the arena, which would be another shock. Then Atomic would face Corkscrew in the Heat final, but with Corkscrew not working properly, it's just easily flipped by Atomic, and Atomic would make it to the series semi-finals. And of course nothing else changes until the last heat, where Chaos 2 and Storm Force are there instead of Pussycat and the Executioner. Now, I already went over this before, because this exact same heat came up in another episode, but just to summarise, the winners would be Chaos 2, Terahertz, Claude Hopper and Fluffy. Chaos 2 would beat Claude Hopper, even if it's for a judge's decision. Fluffy beats Terahertz, and then Chaos 2 gets lucky against Fluffy and either flips it out the arena, or Fluffy just breaks down. Either way, Chaos 2 would go through to the series semi-finals. So then in semi-final 1, it's almost the same. It's mostly the same. The only difference would be Hypno-Disc would be fighting Wild Thing instead of Chaos 2. But in a battle of the spinners, Hypno-Disc would again beat Wild Thing on a judge's decision. The loser's melee still happens as usual, with S3 coming out of that. But then this would mean that Hypno-Disc would fight Bigger Brother like one round earlier, and that plays out the exact same way, with Hypno-Disc being dumped into the pit, which is an even bigger shock considering in this timeline it's the two-time champion, and then this is how it gets dethroned. So, well, meanwhile Razor beats S3, so that's one difference so far. Hypno-Disc doesn't make the Series 5 Grand Final. And then in the other semi-final we would have Wheelie Big Cheese fight Atomic, Firestorm 3 fight Bulldog Breed, and Chaos 2 would fight Panic Attack. I mean, Wheelie Big Cheese might struggle a bit to get under Atomic. Maybe it would get under it twice, but Atomic would be okay, and Atomic would more than likely do most of the flipping, and either it would flip Wheelie Big Cheese out, or Wheelie Big Cheese still breaks down. Now with Firestorm and Bulldog Breed, it's hard to say. I mean, either Firestorm would win this just by being able to get more flips in, or Bulldog Breed would maybe flip Firestorm once, or try and fail to flip it over, but the impact would still make Firestorm's link fall out, because this is where the issue of the link happened. But I don't think it would matter either way, and I'll explain why in a moment. Meanwhile, Chaos 2 would fight Panic Attack and just flip it all over the place and win very easily, especially since Panic Attack is having those internal issues. And then we would either get the exact same loser's melee, where Firestorm comes out on top, or Bulldog Breed would come out on top here. Wheelie Big Cheese isn't likely to be able to get at Bulldog Breed and flip it over. So it would play out in a similar way, where Wheelie Big Cheese gets pushed around and flipped by Bulldog Breed, whereas Panic Attack is struggling to catch anyone at first and is still having some minor issues, but Wheelie Big Cheese would end up breaking down. I mean, a Panic Attack might get under Bulldog Breed and shove it around, maybe tip it over, but I guess Bulldog Breed should be able to self-right. Maybe. It's hard to say whether or not this version of Bulldog Breed can self-rise, but we're just going with the assumption that it can. But yeah, I think Bulldog Breed would still be able to get a panic attack from the front or the back and flip it. I guess I could go with an alternate scenario where panic attack would win, but chances are Bulldog Breed would more than likely win this and get back in. Now it can't fight Firestorm again, so it would end up having to fight Chaos 2 while Firestorm takes on Atomic. And this is another scenario that I went over before, but I genuinely think Atomic would be able to beat Firestorm 3 here, because Firestorm, well, with the way it is with the flipper, might struggle to get under Atomic, at least completely, and Atomic would get lucky and flip it out. And as for Chaos 2 and Bulldog Breed, I don't know if Bulldog Breed would be able to completely flip Chaos 2 over or get a chance to. I mean, Chaos 2 would definitely send Bulldog Breed flying, but I don't think it would get to a point where Chaos 2 gets flipped over completely, but I think Chaos 2 could get lucky here and send Bulldog Breed out the arena. I mean, I know in flipper mirror matches at this point, Chaos 2 normally loses these, but against Bulldog Breed, Chaos 2 coming out on top would be the best guess here. So yeah, we have a slightly different grand final lineup. Obviously, Bigger Brother and Razor would still go through, but Atomic and Chaos 2 would also go through here. And Chaos 2 would then get pitted against Bigger Brother, and that would play out the same way as in the real time, where Chaos 2 runs out of gas, can't get back up, and then gets pitted. This would mark the first time Chaos 2 fails to get to the top 2, and then Razor would fight Atomic, and yeah, this is where Atomic's good run would come to an end here. I don't see it beating Razor. I mean, Razor would just crush it, maybe even damage the flipper. So yeah, Razor is going through here. So we'd have the exact same grand final where Razor beats Bigger Brother, but then we'd have a different playoff. So Atomic should be fine to do the playoff, but it becomes an action replay of another fight where they're just flipping each other, but Chaos 2 then ends up running out of gas, and Atomic would probably send Chaos 2 out the arena and get revenge for the defeat in Series 4. So Atomic would win and take third place. I just need to stop for a minute. So for the 6 floors, Bulldog Breed would be seeded, and Atomic would actually be in this series, because, as mentioned before, Atomic didn't qualify in the original timeline, but because here it made it to the semi-finals and beyond, it would be seeded. But this would mean that Tornado and Dominator 2 would not be seeded here. So for the Series 6 seeds, the top 2 would remain the same, but we'd have 3 Atomic, 4 Chaos 2, 5 Hypno-Disc, 6 Firestorm 4, 7 Bulldog Breed, 8 S3, 9 Panic Attack, 10 Wild Thing, 11 Spawn again, and 12 Stinger. Now it was actually a nightmare trying to figure out where Dominator 2 and Tornado and the robots in their heats would fit. Because normally when I do this, I keep the robots in the same battles, in the same heats, but with the heats being in a different order. But I had trouble figuring out, like I said, where Dominator 2 and Tornado would go. So I tried to calculate it another way, where with the fights where there's no seeded robot, I would keep them in the same heats and in the exact same place. Of course, this made it still a bit tricky to figure out, but then I had to have a think about the robots that were eliminated in round 1 in those respective fights. So, Terrible, Edgehog, Revolution 2, Judge Shred 2.5, Something, Accident 2, Chronic 2 and Warhog. I had to really think about which of these were the weakest ones and would have been less likely to qualify. So after some thinking and trying to go with my very best guess, I would have said that either Something or Accident 2 would not qualify, because, I mean, no disrespect, but they just seem to be the weakest ones, and would be replaced by Atomic, which means that Atomic would be in the same fight as Dominator 2, Hydra, and either Something or Accident 2. So then I ended up applying this to the original layout, basically, which would mean that Smidsy, Common Getter-X, Warhog and St. Aggro would still be in the same heat as Dominator 2 and Atomic. So in this case it would be Heat B. So I think rather than go with 2 different alternate timelines in the same video, this is the course that I'm going to go with. So basically, Heat A and Heat L, literally nothing changes, because Razor's still seeded 1 and Bigger Brother's still seeded 2. So we'll go on to Heat B, which consists of Atomic, Dominator 2, Hydra, and either Something or Accident 2, Smidsy, Common Getter-X, Warhog, and St. Aggro. Now we know obviously Smidsy and Common Getter-X would win their fight, but as for Atomic, Dominator 2, Hydra, and one of the other 2, well, I guess it depends. If Something is in this one, then Hydra or Hydra or Atomic would flip it over immediately, like the same if it was Accident 2. Now Hydra does keep going for Dominator 2 here, and puts up a great fight, although Dominator 2 still comes out on top in the fight, but then Atomic would I guess go for one or the other. Of course Dominator 2 can self-right and quickly get back up, but Hydra, despite having a lifting arm, wouldn't be able to self-right because it's angled like this at the back, which kind of makes it harder to do. So Hydra would end up getting flipped over as well by Atomic and just left for dead. So yeah, Dominator 2 and Atomic win this one. And just to try and match the timeline, Dominator 2 would face Smidsy and beat it. And then Atomic would beat Common Getterix with not too many problems. And then the Heat final is a rematch between Atomic and Dominator 2, but it just goes the same way as the other fight, with Atomic prevailing. So then we move on to Heat C. So we have a very different Heat C. So we've got Hypno-Disc in this one because it's seeded 5. Barbarous 2, 4x4, and Granny's Revenge 2 in one fight. And then because of the weird order I've gone with, we would actually have Anarchy, Revolution 2, 4, and Judge Shred 2.5 in this one. So yeah, Hypno-Disc and Barbarous win their fight, Anarchy and 4 win the other one. Then in round 2, Hypno-Disc would face 4 and trash it. And then there'd be an interesting clash between Anarchy and Barbarous. It would be quite a slippery battle. I mean, Anarchy is very well armoured for a walker. I mean, the best Barbarous 2 can do is just hit it from the side, but it's not very impactful. And Anarchy would get a lucky hit with the axe, completely stop Barbarous 2 in its tracks, and would go through to the Heat final. And then there'd be a revenge clash. Since Anarchy is the successor of 101, unfortunately it wouldn't fare much better here, because Hypno-Disc, well, it's just too quick and manoeuvrable, unlike walkers, and would just keep slamming Anarchy from the side, doing damage, and would go through to the semi-finals. So then in Heat D, which is a very different lineup, we have Bulldog Breed, Cat Free, Spin Doctor, Revenge of Trouble and Strife, Tornado, Inshreddable, Terrible, and Edgehog. So yeah, Bulldog Breed and Cat Free would win their fights. Tornado and Inshreddable would win the other. And Bulldog Breed would face Inshreddable and beat it quite easily since it didn't recover from the first fight. Whereas Cat Free wouldn't stand a chance against Tornado, so Tornado wins that. And then the two would then meet in the Heat final. Tornado, I guess, would more than likely put on the scoop, because that's what Tornado usually uses against flippers. And even though Tornado might get turned on its back, it could still push Bulldog Breed quite easily from the side or the back, especially since they're pretty flat. Yeah, it would be a bit of a struggle for Bulldog Breed, so Tornado would more than likely come out on top here and win. So then it's basically the Heat of Panic Attack and Terahertz. Nothing changes, Terahertz wins. Then Heat F, it's Spawn Again's Heat, and Ming Freeze, again, nothing changes, Spawn Again wins that. Heat H, Heat G, the Heat with Stinger, 13 Black and Fluffy, nothing changes, 13 Black wins. Then Heat H, it's Wild Thing's Heat, again, nothing changes, Wild Thing wins. Heat I, S3's Heat, nothing changes, S3 wins. Heat J, it's Firestorm 4's Heat. Firestorm wins, nothing changes. In Heat K, it's Heat with Chaos 2 and Danton Kier. Nothing changes, Danton Kier wins. And then Bigger Brother, of course, wins the last heat. So this means that for semi-final number 1, we would have... this is tricky. I guess to match the timeline, we'd still have Spawn Again and Terahertz face each other. Maybe. So that leaves Tornado, Hypno-Disc, Atomic and Razor. Then again, I don't know if we can match it fully, because if I put Terahertz against Spawn Again and Hypno-Disc against Tornado, then it would mean that Razor and Atomic would fight each other, and usually the top ranking seeds are kept separate. So if we're doing this, we're still doing it where the winner of Heat A faces Heat B, C against F, D against C, then as it was laid out for the real Series 6, I guess Hypno-Disc and Tornado would still have to fight each other. It would mean that I'd have to put Razor against Terahertz and Atomic against Spawn Again. Yeah, that would work. So obviously the Tornado Hypno-Disc fight plays out the same way. Razor would beat Terahertz in the same way as in the real timeline, facing each other like 2 rounds earlier. And because Spawn Again is still a bit unhealthy, Atomic would beat Spawn Again. So, yeah, it would be a slightly different losers melee. Terahertz would be filling Bigger Brother's role here as the robot that faces Hypno-Disc and Spawn Again. So I'm not sure how... It'd be interesting to see how this would play out. I guess Hypno-Disc would start strong and just slam into Terahertz and Spawn Again. I feel like Hypno-Disc would still keep out the way of the axe. Then I guess Hypno-Disc would end up ricocheting off one or the other and crash into the wall and then break down. But then, in an awkward turn of events, Terahertz would end up breaking down because it never fully recovered, which means Spawn Again would win this one, despite still having some problems and being unhealthy. But it would still technically be the only one still moving, but just about. So Spawn Again would win the losers melee and get back in. And hopefully at this point it would still be fitter to fight. So who would that leave us with? Let's see. Razor, Atomic, Spawn Again, Tornado. So I guess that would mean that Razor would face Spawn Again, and have it be a rematch from last time, which means that Tornado would face Atomic. And it's always tricky to say who'd win this clash. I know, again, Tornado would use the scoop here. I know Atomic could turn Tornado over maybe once or twice, but again, because Atomic is kind of flat around the sides, Tornado can still push Atomic around. But it's hard to say whether Atomic would even get a chance to flip Tornado out the arena. And it might be hard to get under Tornado completely because of the tyres. But I'm not sure Atomic would get a chance to flip Tornado out, unless Tornado was upside down and they charged at each other head on. But I don't think that would happen. Yeah, Atomic would more likely make the mistake of flipping Tornado back the right way up after being flipped upside down, because yeah, that's what Firestorm did in the grand final in the real timeline, and Tornado would likely take advantage of this and then end up shoving Atomic down the pit. So yeah, Tornado would still likely win this one. Yeah, that's the very best guess. And then, regardless of whether Spawn again is healthy or not, Razor would end up defeating Spawn again, and go through to the grand final. But hey, at least this was the best Spawn again did, even though it got through by pure luck. So, in the other semi-final, yeah, I guess we would still have Firestorm face 13 Black, Danton Kier face S3, which would mean that Bigger Brother would fight Wild Thing. Now I know Bigger Brother did have a few problems while fighting Dominator 2 near the end in the real timeline, but I don't think they'd really come into play here, and yeah, I still don't think Wild Thing would beat Bigger Brother here. I mean, Bigger Brother might end up flipping Wild Thing out the arena, or just get it on the arena sidewall, or Wild Thing would get stuck on its sides. Either way, Bigger Brother would come out on top here, whereas Firestorm beats 13 Black in the same way as before, and S3 beats Danton Kier the same way as before. So we'd have the same losers melee, only it would be in semi-final 2 instead of 1, and Danton Kier would win this one. So who would be left with? So Bigger Brother, Firestorm, S3, Danton Kier. So, oh yeah, this is easy. Firestorm would still get pitted against S3 and beat it, and then which means Danton Kier would face Bigger Brother, and I feel like Danton Kier would more than likely beat Bigger Brother if they met. So that would be another shock. I mean, Danton Kier already took out Chaos 2, and now it took out Bigger Brother. So basically, Danton Kier would be in the grand final instead of Terahertz here. So then, what would happen here is Razor would beat Danton Kier, then Tornado beats Firestorm, just like in the real grand final eliminator timeline. Firestorm beats Danton Kier in the playoff, and then we'd have the exact same Series 6 grand final. Of course, this still means, though, that for the 7th Wars, Atomic would be seeded, but not Ming Dynasty, and then I guess they basically swap places in the 7th Wars, so Ming would fight Smidsy, Terror Turtle, and what was it, Cygnus? Was that the other robot from that fight? I'm not sure. And then Atomic would take Ming's place in Ming's heat, basically, with Saint Agro and Seros and all that stuff. And I mean, honestly, the seeding order doesn't really matter here, because the heats and battles are going to be the same, but in a slightly different order. But yeah, Atomic would of course end up winning Ming's heat, and Saint Agro wouldn't go through. I think Smidsy and Cygnus would beat Terror Turtle and Ming. Mean Streak and Hellbent would still win their fight. Smidsy would beat Mean Streak. Cygnus would probably beat Hellbent, but chances are Smidsy would probably beat Cygnus and finally go through to the series semi-final. And Smidsy would go on to fight Exterminator instead of Saint Agro. The other semi-final battles are the same. Exterminator would beat Smidsy, and then the Seven Wars plays out the same way, with Typhoon 2 still winning. So that's basically what would happen if Hypno-Disc beat Chaos 2 in the grand final of Series 3. The main difference is here, Hypno-Disc is the two-time champion of Series 3 and 4, and Atomic actually has a lot more success than it actually did in the real timeline. Of course, Razor would still win the 5th Wars, Tornado the 6th, and Typhoon 2 the 7th. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that Panic Attack did win the losers melee and actually flip Bulldog Breed over and come through that. So, going back to semi-final 2 of Series 5, so let's see, we'd have Atomic, Firestorm, well, Panic Attack wouldn't face Chaos 2 again, so it would end up... I need to remember the seeding order, so Chaos 2, Panic Attack, Firestorm, Atomic. Yeah, Panic Attack would end up fighting Firestorm, and Firestorm would win, and Atomic would beat Chaos 2. Or alternatively, Atomic would fight Panic Attack and beat it, while Firestorm beats Chaos 2. So either way, Atomic and Firestorm would make it to the grand final. So the grand final would be almost the same as the real one, but Atomic would be there instead of Hypno-Disc. So yeah, we'd have 2 unseeded robots here. So Razor would fight Atomic, and Firestorm would fight Bigger Brother. Yeah, that's right, isn't it? Yeah, Razor would beat Atomic, Firestorm would beat Bigger Brother. So I'm just going to write this down real quick, otherwise I'll get confused and mixed up. Yeah, so Bigger Brother and Atomic would fight again in the playoff, and yeah, Atomic would win that and finish third still, while Bigger Brother takes fourth place. And then Razor would fight Firestorm in the grand final, and that would play out the same way as the real fight, with Razor still winning the fifth water, but Firestorm would end up finishing second. So in this scenario, we would now have, well, Razor would still be one, but now Firestorm would be second, 3 Atomic, 4 Bigger Brother, 5 Hypno-Disc, 6 Panic Attack. What? Oh no, hold on, I've got these mixed up again. Hang on. Okay, so I've managed to fix it. God, this is a nightmare doing this. So yeah, it would be 1 Razor, 2 Firestorm, 3 Atomic, 4 Bigger Brother, 5 Hypno-Disc, 6 Chaos 2, 7 Panic Attack, 8 S3. Wild Thing would still be 9th. Spawn again would be seeded 10th, and Bulldog Breed would be seeded 11th, with Stinger being 12th. And using the same calculations, here's how it would go down. So, slightly similar way. So, nothing changes for Heat A, or E, or even H. Heat B, like Atomic's heat, plays out the same way as I talked about before, with Atomic winning. C, Hypno-Disc still wins that. D, with Panic Attack and Terahertz in this one, Terahertz wins that, followed by Wild Thing, and Bulldog Breed and Tornado are in this heat. Tornado wins. G, 13 Black, H, Spawn again, I, S3, J, Danton Kia, K, Bigger Brother, and L, Firestorm 4. So again, for semi-final 1, to try and match the timeline, Razor would face Wild Thing and beat it, and I guess Hypno-Disc would still get pitted against Tornado and get beaten by Tornado, which therefore means that Atomic would fight Terahertz. But I'm not sure who'd win this one. I can't remember if I went over this fight before. But I think Atomic would just struggle a bit too much to get in underneath Terahertz, and Terahertz would damage the flipper. And that would be quite a shock, so Terahertz would more than likely win this one. So the losers melee would be Wild Thing, Hypno-Disc, and Atomic. I mean, Wild Thing stands no chance against either of them, but again, Hypno-Disc would start off strong, slamming into both robots, but again, would probably end up ricocheting off both of them and breaking down, and Atomic would then send Wild Thing flying out the arena, and yeah, Atomic would win this one. And get back in. So let's see. Razor, Atomic. Tornado Terahertz. So yeah, Atomic would probably get pitted against Tornado and get beaten by Tornado, like I said, while Razor defeats Terahertz. So again, Terahertz isn't making the grand final here. And then for semi-final 2, let's see, I guess we'd have Firestorm still fight 13 Black and beat it. S3 would fight Danton Kia and beat it, which just leaves it leaves Spawn again with Bigger Brother, and because Spawn again is still having problems, Bigger Brother would win that fight. So yeah, the losers melee would be Spawn again, Danton Kia and 13 Black. But yeah, this would be an easy win for Danton Kia. 13 Black gets flipped over and put out of action just like that. Spawn again is still having problems, and Danton Kia would take advantage of that. It probably wouldn't flip Spawn again out the arena, but it would still put it in the pit, so Danton Kia would get back in. Firestorm would then fight S3 and beat it, and Bigger Brother would still fight Danton Kia, and Danton Kia would win. Okay, so I guess nothing changes there, and it would play out the same way like I described before. So yeah, I guess it doesn't matter who wins that losers melee between Panic Attack, Bulldog Breed and Weedy Big Cheese. So yeah, like I said, Hypno-Disc would still be the 2-time UK champion, winning Series 3 and 4 instead of Chaos 2. Atomic would be a grand finalist in the 5th Wars and finish 3rd, and be a semi-finalist in the 6th
My mum's
Wars.
coming in with our doggies.
Oh, okay.
So you know. Is that alright?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and like I said, Razor would still win Series 5, Tornado Series 6 and Typhoon 2 Series 7, so really they're the only changes that would happen. And that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching.